Okay, we're back with another Capture One editing session today, and today I'm going to be looking at the incredibly powerful color editor block inside Capture One Pro. I am using the most recent build of Capture One 23, I think it's build 16.4 something or other, so it's as up to date as you can get at the moment as of July 2024. Before we dive into how to use the color editor, please remember to drop a subscribe and a like into the various blocks around here once you've finished watching this tutorial. Your support does go a long way to being able to help continue this particular channel and further enables me to make more videos. On that note, if you have a suggestion for another video in future, pop it in the comments below and I will see if I can get to it at some stage. Right, with that out of the way, let's get back into the color editor. The color editor is an incredibly powerful editing palette inside Capture One Pro, which allows you to select individual colors or a range of colors and edit them selectively. The color editor has three main modes: basic, advanced, and skin tone. Basic is very simple. If I want to work on an individual color inside the photograph, all I need to do is select from the colors themselves, and the last block is all colors. So if I would like to increase the saturation globally over the image, I just need to make sure that this last block is selected, and I can increase or decrease my saturation or the hue, which would make it go towards the magenta on the left or towards the green on the right. I'll double click the nub to take it back to center. Or I can identify an individual color range inside the photograph and work just on that one. If I would like to adjust just the greens inside my image, I would grab the green slider and I could change the hue. I'd like it to go a little bit more towards the green, and it's only affected the greens inside the photograph. If I want to reduce or increase the saturation of the pinks and the purples, I would go probably into this color here, and I can then adjust my hues. So for instance, we can make it look slightly more red and increase the saturation as well. This is a fairly rough way of doing it because we're identifying the colors based on our own perceptions. It is easier to use the actual color selection tool, which is in the bottom right hand corner of the tab. Once we click it, if we click on the image itself, it'll take us directly to that color. This is a great way to be able to identify the colors and work on them. However, the basic slider is only there as a bludgeoning tool. It's very basic. It's far easier, in fact, to use the advanced color editor. Advanced color editor requires that we actually select the color to start with. So again, let's say I would like to work on the flowers themselves. So I would take my color picker, click on the colors, and you will see that the colors actually appear in the color wheel itself. We can now highlight and finesse how much of that color range is going to be affected by our edit. The easiest way to do this is by clicking on the view selected color range and clicking the tick. Once that gets selected, all the other colors that haven't been accepted turn to black and white. They're desaturated so that we are able to more effectively see what we have selected inside our color range itself. To be able to change that color range, we can use our sliders around the image itself and we can drag this. So you can drag to include other colors, or you can drag outwards to remove the colors that are less saturated, or drag from the outside inwards to take the most saturated colors and remove them from our selection. We can even shift about the selection itself by grabbing the outside wheel and just moving it around. So even if you've made a mistake in selecting your color to start with, it will make it easier to find that color range itself. The little dot in the center is the color that is the target color that will be changed when we actually start working with the hue, saturation, and lightness. So once I've selected my color range, as in over here, I would then switch off the view selected color range, and then I can start making my changes. If I would like my flowers slightly darker, I can take the lightness and I can bring them back a little bit. I can increase the saturation if I want to, and of course I can change the hue ever so slightly if I want to. You can add as many of these color points as you would like inside your image. So if I would like to change the background a little bit more, I just need to take my color picker, click on the background so that it selects a green. If you want to check what colors it's selected, you can go to the view selected color range. You'll see all the greens that have been selected, and then I can change and work on that particular image. I'm going to move my smoothness up The smoothness is basically feathering out the edges of your color selection so that there is less artifacting, or no artifacting for that matter, between the different colors inside the image itself. If I want to change this so that it looks slightly greener, I would take my hue and I would move it to the right. And I could potentially take my saturation up a little bit over here as well. And if I wanted to darken my background, I would take my lightness slider and drag that to the left. To give you an indication of what that looks like before and after. So this is an image taken of the white dunes in Madagascar on a recent Nature's Light workshop. If you're interested in joining one of these workshops, you can take a look at the link in the top right hand corner, which will take you through to the Nature's Light website, which shows the various places that we go to be able to lead these photographic tours. The photograph was taken in twilight and there was this beautiful glow in the horizon over here. So I'm going to very quickly edit the photograph so that we get our basics right. So we want to open up our highlights a little bit, open up some more of these shadows over here as well to get that right. And yeah, there we go. And probably bring up the brightness a touch. There we go. But the image doesn't show the color that was really apparent in the sky. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to bring out my saturation, but I still want to get more of that pinkish purple glow that was apparent in the sky itself. Now, one of the easiest ways to do that is to go down to our color editor, grab our advanced section, select the color tone over here, and you will see how it now selects the color. If I want to identify where the area is, I just need to quickly say view selected color range, and you will notice that it is now selecting this color up in the sky itself. If I want to increase that range, I can actually just bring these out. There we go. That's right. Nice. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is just increase the saturation and darken it ever so slightly. So bring that down on the lightness. Make sure that the smoothness is pulled out to the right so that there is no obvious lines of gradation, and then to increase my saturation in the sky itself over there. If you want to see what it looks like before and after, you will hold the option button and click on the reset, and you will see how that has just affected my sky so that we've got that nicely toned. I would like to increase some of the purples over here as well, so I'm just going to click on those purple tones as well, and you'll see that that's just that little line there. And again, same kind of thing, we are going to increase the saturation in our purples a little bit, adjust our hue so that it works, and there you go. To see your before and after, so you'll see that that's a very quick way to be able to choose a color and work just on that individual color. Okay, to see how we can use the color editor to be able to correct an image or to be able to edit an image so that we have a better color palette itself, we can take a look at this photograph. This is a 3-image stitch of the interior of the Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca. Now, using the ambient light has meant that you are effectively relying on incandescent light bulbs, which have a very low Kelvin rating, meaning that they are quite orange, as you can see in the photograph itself. To be able to correct that orange, what we have to do is go in and change our white balance setting for the image. So if I bring my white balance down, you'll see that we suddenly have a better tonal range over here, or at least the colors start to look more natural. But by doing that, we now get very blue highlights where the outside light has filtered in through the large windows on the exterior of the mosque itself. So we're now going to have to try to correct that somehow. First off, I do want to have more color inside the image itself anyway. So if I push my saturation levels up so slightly, you will see we'd start getting really nice creams and warm tones happening in the actual arches themselves, but we still have this horrible blue now in the bottom, which we want to try and minimize. To do so is actually relatively simple. All we need to do is go down to our color editor, and let's start with the basics. We'll click on basic. We know it's more or less of a blue, and if we take our blue and we take our saturation sliders down, you'll notice that the blue disappears from the scene itself. And effectively, the blue has become black and white. More effectively, what I can do is I can grab my advanced tab and I can click on the color picker and I will find my blue tones themselves. I'm going to open up the smoothness on that, and then I'm just going to take my saturation down from there, and you'll see that the blue suddenly disappears, which means that we can start working on the colors more effectively. And in fact, if I still believe that there is more cyany blue inside there, I can actually go in there, grab my color picker, select that, and similarly we can take our saturation and bring that down, and we can even change the hue slightly to make it go warmer. To see a before and after on this, just hold down your option button and click on the reset, and you'll see how we have effectively controlled our blue highlights. If you would like to bring some of that blue back, we can just bring our saturation slider back a little bit and it'll come in once more. For this particular image, I feel like the foreground still needs to be lightened ever so slightly, so I'll also grab a gradient tool, drag that up a little bit, and bring in my shadows just a touch. There we go. And your final image is going to end up looking like that. Let's use this image of the Hassan II mosque to show how I can use the color editor to be able to improve the photograph from its initial adjustment. To adjust the image initially, let's first get our levels correct. So I'm going to go to my levels adjustment and I'm going to just brighten the image ever so slightly, just like that. I feel like there needs to be more light in the foreground, so I'm going to grab my gradient tool and I'm going to drag that up a little bit and then open up the shadows in the foreground just a touch, as well as maybe a little bit more of the exposure itself. There we go. I'm now happier with that particular image over there, but what I want to do is I would like to get more of this color in the sky itself, the oranges. The problem is, if I take my saturation slider, you'll see how to get those oranges popping out, my yellows become effectively nuclear. So what I want to do is identify those oranges while refraining from attaching those yellows. The best way to do this is to create a new filled layer. So I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to say adjustment layer, and I'm going to make sure that it is filled. So I can say fill mask. You can check that by holding down the M button and you'll see that everything there is a mask. We are going to remove the actual mask from the photograph itself. So I'm going to go to my AI eraser button and I'm going to erase. There we go. To see your mask now, you'll see that everything except the mask is accepted inside the mask. Now we'll go down to our color editor and I'm going to use my advanced editor here. I will take my color picker, select my oranges, and you can see the oranges there. If I want to see exactly what I'm selecting, I can click on the view selected color range and you'll see how the blues have gone black and white. I can further identify those oranges by dragging in my lines over here. And there we go. Right. So we are just selecting our oranges now inside the tone. It is also picking up some of the mask, but remember my mask is actually going to help avoid that. So let's switch this off over here. And now I can go wild because I'm only working on that particular one. So I'm going to darken that just a touch so that my sky gets nice and orange. And we're going to take our saturation and we're going to drag it to the right ever so slightly. Let's increase our smoothness so that it's nice and smooth there. And there we go. Right. So to see the before and after, you can just click on your adjustment layer and you can see how I have just brightened up my oranges. If I want to work on the blues as well, I already have the mask in place so it works quite nicely. So I will just grab my picker, choose a blue cyany area, and we want to actually lighten that up potentially. So I'm going to lighten that up a bit and bring some saturation to it and also bring out my smoothness. There we go. In fact, if we wanted to darken, in fact, let's darken it. There we go. That looks better. I'm going to darken that. We've got some nice saturation inside there. I still feel like these yellows in the mask itself are a little too saturated. They're just too yellow. So I'm going to create another layer here. I'm going to click adjustment layer 2 and we're going to make a selection of the mask itself. The easiest way to make that selection is actually to right click on our adjustment layer and say copy mask from adjustment layer 1, which was the layer that we'd done the background color effects to, and then I'm going to invert that mask. There we go. You can hit your M button to make sure, and you'll see that my mask is now selected. With the mask selected, I'm going to go to my color selection tool. We're going to select the yellows. So we have our yellow tone selected there, and I'm actually going to bring down my saturation now. And there we go. Smoothness, I'm going to open up slightly. And if you need to, you can change your hues as well. You can see if I slide to the left, it goes magenta. If I slide to the right, it goes green. We want it more or less balanced so that it looks, there we go. Right, again, to see your before and after, hit your Y button. You can see the changes that we've made just using the color controls and a few simple layers to be able to adjust our colors individually. Super important for a lot of capture users though is also the fact that we have a skin tone color adjustment available to us right there in the native raw editing. What this does is it basically selects a color range based on your color picker. It tries to smooth out the range of colors inside that particular selection. So here I've got an example of a model, Natasha, and you can see that we've got some nice side light coming from the side, but it also shows off that although she had quite good base makeup on, there are some changes to the tones around the cheek, for instance, and on the forehead itself. So what we'd like to do is actually smooth that out and essentially give a more uniform tone to the skin itself. So the easiest way to do this, and I always recommend doing this, is to create a new layer so that we can change that. So I'm going to create a new filled layer by going to the layers and saying add new filled adjustment layer. Then we're going to switch across to the skin tone in the color editor. Using the color picker, we'll pick a tone of skin over here. And if we want to identify where those tones are, again, we can head down to the view selected color range, and you can see that only her skin is selected as well as her hair in this instance. Right, so we can actually identify that a little bit more easily now by simply pulling this in so that less of her hair is affected. Can pull that out a little bit, and we can take our smoothness and we can just pull that out. All right, so you can see it's not going to affect her eyes, for instance. It will affect her lips, so another reason why we want to keep this on a separate layer. Here's the important thing though. What it's now going to do is we're going to switch off view selected color range. What it's now going to do is we've got this uniformity slider. If we pull those over, you will see how her skin suddenly becomes more uniform throughout. So any changes, for instance, on the cheek over here, and I'm going to quickly choose a before after tone so we can do that, and we're going to zoom in. I will zoom into that. And there you go. So it's done an instant skin softening to the image itself. If I'm concerned about the fact that the color in her lips have gone, this is the reason why we've photographed it on a separate layer. So using my standard eraser tool, remove that section of the mask to get that color back, and I can do the same with the eyes as well if I want to. So there is our photograph now with her face, and we've already corrected just the skin tones itself. This makes it a lot easier if I need to go later on into the photograph and do additional skin smoothing or skin repair work potentially. The skin tone tool in the color editor is useful for more than just skin tones though. Just as a case in point, what we can do is we can actually make the background that we have over here also more uniform. I'm going to rename this as skin tone. And then we're going to create a new filled layer above, filled adjustment layer, and I'm going to call that background. Grab the color picker, select the background gray, and you'll see it's actually got a little bit of blue inside it as well. Let's just make sure that it's selecting everything. Perfect. It's selecting everything except her. There we go. And what we'll now do is slam our hue, saturation, and lightness all across to the right hand side, and you will see how we've actually we've made the background a little bit more uniform. There we go. So we've now got a great base image from which to start in terms of being able to edit her. Looking at the image as well, I've noticed that our skin tone effects have also affected her hair ever so slightly. So once more, by working on a separate layer, it's nice and easy. I can go into my erase tool and we can just pull that out from the photograph so that it doesn't affect the image itself. Something else to be aware of on the background, I noticed that it's also affected her eyes, so we want to just make sure that the eyes haven't also suddenly been uniformed out along with everything else, and her teeth, and there you go. Let's take a quick look at before and after again. So there's before and there's after. These are fairly rapid adjustments in Capture One Pro. But Capture One color editor has another little trick up its sleeve, and that's the ability to make a separate layer just from the color selection itself. So let's go back to our mosque image in Casablanca, and let's say I would like to only add a little bit of structural detail, but only to the mosque itself and to the yellow parts of the mosque itself. One of the ways that we can create our mask is by selecting a color and then creating a mask from it. So I'm going to go to my advanced selection tool again. I'm going to grab my selection tool. I'm going to click on my yellow over here to make sure that we're selecting only those tones. There we go. So now what we're going to do is identify those tones by taking our smoothness out. We want to have less of the orange and only the yellows. There we go. Bring that in and tighter. And there we go. So we have a little bit of our oranges there, but we can also remove those later on. And now I will go to my contextual menu, the 3 little dots in a row. I will click on that and I will say create masked layer from selection. What this now does is it doesn't apply any of the changes, but what it will do is create a completely new layer with no adjustments attached to it, but with an actual mask on it. And here you'll see it's called the color range mask 1. So now if I click M, you will see I've selected those color ranges. If I want to remove those oranges, for instance, over here, I'm just going to grab my erase tool and we'll pull out the areas that we don't need. And there we go. We now have a really nice mask just of the mask itself, but based only on color. And then I can go into my adjustments that I was looking at, which was clarity and some structure, to be able to increase the detail inside the building, but without having to increase the detail anywhere else. Okay, so that was the color editor in a nutshell. Hopefully it hasn't gone on too long. Thanks again for watching. Please remember to put additional suggestions for Capture One videos in the comments fields below. I will try and get to them when I get a chance. Until then, happy capture editing. Cheers.